right, this is Committee of the Whole. This is Monday, June 22nd, 2015. We're at 6 p.m. Councilor Capone.
Here.
Councilor Del Sola.
Here.
Councilor DeFlorio.
Here.
Councilor Hill.
Here.
Councilor Manningham.
Here.
Councilor Marchese.
Here.
Councilor McKibben.
Here.
Councilor Napolitano.
Here.
Councilor Suchina.
Here.
Councilor Sani.
Here.
And Councilor Simonelli.
He's present.
11 members present. We do have a quorum.
11 members present. We have a quorum. Please rise, salute the flag.
Right.
Okay, clerk will read the only item of business on the
Piece of
agenda.
business is order of Council Frank Capone as president to transfer $300,000 from the budgetary fund balance into the master plan account to fund a comprehensive master plan for the city of Everett.
Looks like we have Mr. Souza here, so if there's no objection, we'll have Mr. Souza come forward for a presentation. Councilor Marchese? Sure. Mr. Souza, if you please just introduce yourself for the record.
Sure. Tony Sousa, Acting Director of Planning and Development.
Councilor Marchese?
Mr. Souza, how are you tonight?
Doing well.
The comprehensive plan,
Yes.
what is it? Is it something physically we look at, or is it just something that we draw out, or what is
Sure.
it?
Well, thank you for the question, and actually, I have a whole presentation explaining
Why don't you want to do your
the-
presentation? I'm sorry.
the whole piece of that, so
All right.
appreciate that.
Why don't you go ahead and do that, and then we'll reserve our questions till the end, and I'll
Sure.
put you first at the list if you want, Councilor Marchese.
Sure. So, again, members of the council, thank you for having me here this evening. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about, and I prepared this PowerPoint and also provided you with the slides of this presentation as well. One of the things in the planning realm that, actually one of my personal favorite things to work on is master planning. And here in the city of Everett, we're fortunate that we do actually have a master plan in place. It's a little outdated, but I certainly value the work that was put in. The Everett Master Plan, technically the one that we have in the books, goes back to 1965. This is I think my only copy, but I'm happy to share. So one of the things in the, again, in the planning realm, in our department, we've done master plans before for different neighborhoods, Lower Broadway, Commercial Triangle master plan that we have underway. But what I'm talking about here, and you hear about master plans for various things, a financial master plan, a parks master plan and so on. This being a comprehensive master plan, it's a land use master plan that really ties in all of our other planning documents, whether it be our housing production plan, which just approved by the council not that long ago, a transportation plan, for example, economic development plan. This brings it actually all together. So let me just get started here, and I do call this a master plan update, which technically the update would be from our document here from 1965, but times have changed. Land use patterns have changed. The population, of course, has changed. We've seen it, and forecasts looking ahead, things will change as well. In the next 10, 15 years, for example, population increase, we look about an additional 10,000 people or so. That's where the most recent estimates are. The economy is changing. Again, our land use is changing. Types of businesses that are here are changing. Needs and the outlook all come into full circle when we're looking at this master plan. More importantly, what is it not? And it's not a zoning ordinance, although there might be a recommendation out of this document should the council wish to approve down the road of potential zoning changes. It's not an eminent domain plan, nothing like that. It's not even a legal document. It's essentially a long-range plan for purposes of guiding growth and development here in our city. So the purpose of the master plan itself, when we look at it, it's an expression of Everett's intention for the future. It said it provides guidance to accomplish that vision. We look at the economy, housing, and transportation, the community population, municipal facilities, land use patterns, land use developments, preservation, open space, and the driving force behind this master plan, no different than in 65, is public participation. And essentially, the way master plans are broken down. It's through a dialogue, through a conversation with the community, with the residents, with the business owners on each of these topic areas. Again, the economy, housing, transportation, land use, community population, the environment, and so on. It's based on public input, it's based on surveys, it's based on existing and forecasted economic conditions, and so as I mentioned, the purpose is an expression of Everett's intention for the future. What are the benefits? Consistency with decision making. With the master plan, you have a steady point of reference. It's the ability to make informed decisions, right? Because we have facts about the existing conditions, the trends that are occurring, so we can better understand the impact of our decisions when we look at whether it be a new facility, when we look at options for increasing or supporting housing, mixed-use developments, and so on. I do believe it does achieve predictability, and this is something that I've come to see in our community and in other communities as well. There's a certain comfort level knowing what may take place, what may not take place in your neighborhood. What's sort of the vision, again, for the community for this given area, let's say, maybe where I live or where I work or so on. So the master plan itself, it is, in fairness, it is, I believe, long overdue. And it's, I think, a great start and solidify not only the stuff that we've done already, but also, again, looking ahead, giving us a strategy for future development. The legal requirements of a master plan, essentially, it's derived through the Mass General Laws itself. And what's interesting is, and I apologize, but I'm just going to read here. It comes from Mass General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 81D, and it's really put in the purview of one of the responsibilities of planning boards here in Massachusetts. Let me read here. It says, to provide a basis for decision-making regarding the long-term physical development of a municipality. Currently, in the legislature, in the last few years and looking ahead, there's actually a movement for what's called a Zoning Reform Act to look at our existing state laws as they pertain to planning, to zoning. And again, looking ahead, master planning is an important element of this, potentially this new Reform Act coming down the road. The American Planners Association of Massachusetts, for which I'm also a member of, has been looking at master plan developments and would essentially like to make it a requirement down the road so that communities can plan accordingly, make sure that their zoning ordinance are aligned with community needs, desires, and existing economic trends and current conditions. Why now? Well, I kind of alluded to the beginning of this. We had the Lower Broadway master plan, which we were very fortunate to launch that early, which we know attracted a new development here and potentially 4 other new developments. I mentioned about the Commercial Triangle Master Plan, which I'm excited should be finalized in the next few weeks. The Commercial Triangle area being along Revere Beach Parkway. As also mentioned, the Housing Production Plan, which we just approved not that long ago and have received some positive feedback from the state, so hopefully in the next few weeks or so be finalized. We are embarking on a transportation study right now. We're also finalizing a hazardous mitigation plan that hopefully in the next few months will be approved by MEMA and FEMA. So we have a series of planning documents within our community that we've been proactive on, and this master plan would help solidify all of that. Going back into this notion of how do you kind of bring it all together, well, it doesn't make any sense having an economic plan that's not tied into the goals, the objectives of your transportation plan. Likewise, your housing plan should also be tied into your economic plan, should be tied into your transportation plan, and so on. The value of the master plan, engaging with a consultant to assist us, and it is a long process, and I'll talk about the time frame a little while from now, but it's to ensure that you do the community outreach on each of these elements, whether it be open space, whether it be transportation, so on. You engage the public. It's all about a public process. You get goals and objectives in place and a series of recommendations, which may include looking at your zoning, may include other objectives or other strategies to achieve the goals and objectives that they're not mine, they're not ours, they're essentially the community's objectives. So it's a very healthy process when we look at the components of the master plan through what is, I don't want to say required, but what's highlighted in state law, looking at, again, land use, housing, economic development, open space, our natural resources, transportation, municipal facilities, and I would even take it a step further, given the identity of our community and emphasis on public health and a culture of fitness, looking at public health, looking at have an element on social services, and also something that's emphasized in this new direction where we're going, particularly at the state level and regional, the emphasis of regional planning. And I thought, why not? This would be a healthy exercise as we would engage in this master plan to also have a component with respect to regional planning. So how does the process work? Well, as I said earlier, it is an extensive public process, and the law requires an interactive public process to determine the goals and policies of a master plan via a series of many public forums throughout. Time frame, you're talking about 18 months or so. Each of these elements that I talked about will be housing, transportation. Generally, what I've seen, you usually want to give yourself about 8 to 10 weeks or so. Consultants would be on board to review existing plans, to interview with various stakeholders in the community, within here of City Hall, but also to do outreach within different organizations in the community and general public as well. So it is, yes, a long process. It's not a document that just sits on the shelf. It's an action plan. It's something that I think we as planners and just in general as decision makers could certainly utilize and allow for, I'd like to think, an informative discussion, again, that is centered on goals and objectives of the community. Like any other planning exercise, as you've probably seen in the Lower Broadway Master Plan or in our commercial Triangle Master Plan, series of roundtable discussions, mapping, Q&A, question and answer periods, interviews, focus groups, surveys. Now with, of course, with modern technology, the use of Facebook, Twitter, and various savvy survey tools we can use to engage the public. Likewise, one of my goals is extensive outreach to our various residents in the community, a series of outreach to the different demographics that we have, engaged as needed with interpreters and so on, and with the different nonprofits we have to invite them and to participate in this discussion, in this process. Again, how long will the process take? Well, traditionally, a typical master plan, you're looking at conservatively about 15 to 18 months. Which I don't have, but if I were to put out a timeline, I would say each of these elements, again, you want to give about 8 to 10 weeks that I've seen. And there's a series of reports or drafts that are done throughout each stage that are vetted, probably establish, again, this is centered on the planning board, but it probably establish a steering committee of planning board members, perhaps members from the council, those that are interested, and essentially create this steering committee that will also provide input and inform the discussion. Question here, how can implementation of this plan make a difference to my neighborhood? And this is sort of a general question, but something that I find very important. We ask the community to identify what is important, how, where, and what type of development should occur, and what should be preserved or protected. And I mentioned earlier there's a certain level of a certain level of comfort, whether you're an existing resident or business or a prospective developer maybe coming into the community, knowing that there's a vision in place for a given neighborhood, a community-wide vision, I think helps answer questions or ease the maybe sometimes the anxiety of not knowing what may or may not occur. It's kind of like when you lack a vision or a plan, any road will take you there. And on that note, having something like this in place, I think is healthy for development and existing preservation of the values of our community. How will the master plan be finalized? And this is a little bit more sort of procedural point, but essentially at the end of this process that should we engage in, the master plan would be finalized ultimately by a final vote of a planning board and also by review of this council. And with respect to sort of the final outcomes, and it's important to note, I talked about this master plan from 1965, and it's easy to say that it's outdated, But in this activity moving forward, you typically see a master plan last for about 10, 15, 20 years. The most important thing with a master plan, though, is to make sure it's not static. And so when this is finalized, it's important, very important, that every 5 years you go back and you review the master plan, because things have changed. Even in our community, we go back 5 years and we've seen things have changed. So one of the things that, should we embark in this planning vision exercise, is to ensure a periodic review of a master plan to make sure it's current. Again, the document from '65, very well intended, and established the vision for back then. Thinking in that domain, probably we should have been working on now in our third comprehensive master plan, but I do appreciate the work that was done back then, but I do believe it is overdue and well needed to look at this with a fresh set of eyes and new with the new changes in our community that have occurred over the last 50 years. It's long overdue, and kind of look ahead for the next 10, 15, 20 years. With all that being said, as I mentioned, the periodic revisions is key, and ultimately the outcome of this, it's not a legal document, it's a guiding document for decisions for the grants that we write. It certainly helps to build on a grant application, say, look, we have community input, this is the vision, the direction. With prospective developers that come into our community, it's healthy to say, we have a master plan in place. Again, these are the goals, the objectives of our community. How does your project, let's say, fit into the community's vision, community's desire, community's needs for development and progress? So with that, I'll leave it at that. I think, again, going back, why now? Because we're at a very healthy point in the planning process in the city, and looking ahead, I think that this is something that is certainly very healthy and very beneficial for our community. So I digress. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Casey, you all set? Council Sachetta.
Yes, at our last councilors meeting, if I remember correctly, we transferred $1,065,000 from the free cash to different accounts. I believe there's some also transfers from free cash in this meeting here. I believe the auditor, and I could be wrong here, stated that when we get through with the free cash, we're practically down to $300,000. And we're going to use this up here for this plan. Not that I'm against the plan, but we also discussed with the mayor using some free cash to reduce our taxes for the citizens of Everett. I think this could wait until we find out how much free cash we're going to have before we spend or appropriate $300,000 for a master plan. And that's the way I would vote. I would vote against it at this time. Thank you.
Council Mangan, did you have your hand up? Council Mangan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, Mr. Souza. Oh, for instance, you were saying something about like 8 to 10 weeks. For instance, the process starts, let's say this is approved. Are we going to, I assume you're going to have meetings with the public, the general public, get their input. Would the meetings be combined of all those particular aspects you talked about, transportation, housing, or would they be all separate meetings, like one
Sure.
for housing, one
Yeah.
for transportation?
So the way I've seen it done and the way I've engaged in these in the past is you do them separately. So you do them by topic, and you can attend all of them or just those that are of interest. I give that 8 to 10 week reference just, again, for purpose of planning, because it does take some research, some prep work for each of these topics. I see about 2 public meetings of some sort, and again, with use of social media and online surveys and so on, I see components of that as well. I leave it somewhat open because we refer to ultimately to whomever the consultant may be, but again, using examples that I've seen in the past and been involved with, it is done by topic and it is spread out. So this month could be transportation, next month could be municipal facilities and so on.
All right. And the other question I have is that, can you give us any recent, I know you said you like this is like right in your ballpark, but
Yep.
any recent community, cities or towns, maybe in this general area that have undergone this recently?
Sure.
That have, that you think it's made a big difference?
Yeah, so most recently, you look at the town of Hudson is one that I actually look at because last year it received the APA MAO award of 2014. And that one was just of personal interest because it was really sort of the most current and one of a team that I respect in the planning department, but also the group that was put on board. City of New Bedford has also done it. City of Quincy. City of Boston is actually in the process of working on theirs, ironically. And I didn't know this until I started engaging and reviewing our master plan, but theirs goes back to 1965 as well. And so I recognize the need for to revise it, to refresh it. You asked a question as far as also, with respect to, type of benefits, I guess, could be derived from it. Essentially, when you're looking at a master plan, could be a series of recommendations, and one could indeed be, and I've seen zoning recommendations that could come out of this process. And so therefore, we have this planning initiative, but we also have the ability, with this funding, to implement some of the recommendations that could come out of this document. In other communities, for example, the community I just came from, in the city of Woburn, last year they were refreshing, if you will, their master plan. Was called Vision 2020, sort of cliche, but now they're at the sort of the turning point, that period now where they're again refreshing their master plan. But one of the things that also came out was a need to look at their open space and rec plan. Those are good for 5 years. Why is that important? Open space and rec plan required by the state, as well as tied to funding, and you want to keep that current. Otherwise, you're knocked off from tapping into various state grants for parks and so on. And I found it rather creative because as you're engaging in this process, it was one of the elements that I briefly talked about, the open space piece, is that you can also use this master plan as an opportunity to update these other, I don't want to say smaller plans, but other components. Again, our housing production plan, I'd love to see how you take that and see how it fits in with a transportation study that's underway. Any economic development plan that we have in these different neighborhoods, see how it's connected to your transportation plan, so you can kind of sync each of these elements together.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Councilor Napolitano.
Thank you. All right, I got a few questions regarding the
Sure.
300,000. Now, what exactly are we getting for our dollar?
Sure.
How exactly is that money spent? And is this a total amount, or are we going to be looking at additional funding after the next fiscal year?
Sure. So one of the things I looked at was an example of other communities in terms of costs for creating a master plan, but also implementing it. And from my perspective, I think I'm giving you both, actually. The cost to roughly, looking at putting this together, this document, going through this exercise, but also ensuring that we're able to implement. So should there be zone change recommendations, which is not uncommon in these elements, that we're able to either continue with the same, let's say, group of consultants, or maybe even get other consultants to help us with the technical aspects of the zoning change, updating our zoning ordinance, and so on. So from my perspective, I wouldn't want to come in and say, gee, we're at this point and now we need more money. I kind of wanted to leave that. I think that this will allow us to implement, not only to create the master plan, but also to implement it. And that's sort of where I've left it at. I don't see it going beyond the 300,000, so I've left it with that flexibility.
And how was that 300,000 spent?
Well, for example, we would engage with the consultant, and so we'd have to hire a consultant to initiate the master plan. Yes, and they would work with the Department of Planning and Development. You would need a consultant in particular that has the expertise in master plans. There are several of them here in Massachusetts that sort of a multidisciplinary team, whether they have planners on board, engineers, and again, experts that have done these before in other communities. And likewise, in the same token, with the recommendations that come out of the master plan itself, again, 15, 16, 17, 18 months or so down the road, want to be able to implement some of those, so just don't have the plan sitting on a shelf. So in the same token, whether it be the same consultant or maybe another outside firm to assist with zoning ordinance. Zoning ordinance tends to be it's a legal document, right? So a certain expertise or a certain team might be necessary to help us align the zoning ordinance to the master plan itself. So that's why I've left it at 300,000 to allow us the flexibility of doing, really starting it and also implementing it. Thank you.
Councilor Hanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to our Director of Planning, Mr. Souza. On the components of the master plan, I think Councilman Magna touched on it a bit. You mentioned like 6 or 7 things. I think it was like land area, open space, housing, transportation, and several others. Are those absolute positive things that will be in a master plan?
I would say yes. Those are all things that I have seen in every other master plan I've looked
Okay.
at. Yeah.
Could there be others?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, because I'm thinking like a public safety.
Sure.
A police and fire substation down on Lower Broadway. Thinking about use of the river. I didn't hear that mentioned, but, you know, we have a big river there, and it could be developed into waterfront boating or even swimming if we ever get the river cleared up, you know. But, you know, prohibiting so many feet from the river to be built on, those kinds of things.
Sure.
That would be in a master plan? Okay.
Absolutely. Those can be incorporated in a master plan easily.
Okay. And I want to know, like, the time period of, let's say you complete the master plan. Now, as I understand it, the master plan is just a plan.
Yes.
You have to wait for people to come in and say, I like that idea, and I think I'll build a house over here, or something over here. That's how it works?
Well, a master plan would establish the vision. There could be some recommendations for zoning changes or different policies or strategies that the community may wish to engage. So it's a great document to have as a guideline, not only internally but also externally for people that express interest in development.
What's the valid length of time that this master plan could be used by the city? 20 years? 2
Sure,
years?
well, depending who you talk to, but basically you're looking at 15 to 20 years. Some say 10 years, but honestly, I'm looking at 15 to 20 years in such a document, provided that we do these periodic refreshers, if you will, every 5 years. That's important. There's nothing worse. I mean, some communities, they'll do a 20-year master plan, let it sit on a shelf, no implementation whatsoever. It really does a disservice. Certainly, you're wasting money if you do that.
Okay, my last question is that, can there ever be any government funds available for this type of a project?
Well, not that I've seen, but in terms of, I haven't seen any grant opportunities come up for the state for development master plans. I could potentially see, though, down the road that requirements that a master plan be in place in order to tap into certain funds, but I've never seen, from my experience, grant opportunities for the purposes of a master plan project.
Thank you. Thank you. No questions. Thank
Council Del Solo.
Yes, Council Napolitano touched on my question about how you come up with the 300,000, and you did answer that. My other question was, if you start this, when would you need the 300,000 to get the ball rolling? Would you
Sure.
start the plan and then?
Realistically, we're in June now, so we put out an RFP, probably sometime in September, October, would be the sort of the kickoff. Depending on what the proposals would come in at for this initial phase, let's say it's 150 or 200,000. It would depend on how the bid would come in, but in terms of a kickoff, I could say, sometime, let's say September, or sometime in the fall, potentially, should we get the approval tonight from the council. And then you're looking, again, 15 to 18 months down the road. But at some point, when you get into month 14 or 15, you may want to start the conversation about how to implement some of the recommendations that will be developed over this time frame. And with that would be ballpark another 100,000 or so to be able to solidify the plan, to align the plan with your zoning ordinance, review of our zoning ordinance, the existing zoning ordinance, and also prepare a new, if you will, zoning ordinance.
Do you see it going over the 300,000?
I don't see it.
You were talking about also, the last question was, you were talking every 5 years to kind of update it.
Yeah.
What would the cost of that be?
Sure. Well, given the staff that I'm very lucky to have in DPD, Department of Planning and Development, I could see that being done in-house. It's a lot easier to do those in-house than it is to engage in this
initial
kickoff of
start.
master plan. Yeah, it's a big lift. And the 5-year stuff would be a series of, again, of public meetings, but you'd really have a document that you could already work off of that's already been vetted and so on. Most recent one, again, the community that I came from, they were just doing a refresher again, and I think they pulled it off in about 4 months or so. but it's something we have the staff inside to assist with that. The kickoff is really where the bulk of the work is, and the kickoff is, again, the start of this, this new master plan, which would exceed, I think, our capabilities internally. But we could certainly facilitate and assist with whomever the consultants may be.
It will be updated as these ideas or these projects, once you have the master plan completed, what ideas you want to do will be updated with that
Yes.
as it goes on.
As the community evolves, as the ideas, the interests of the community change, or as things come to fruition, go back 5 years here, we didn't have the Lower Broadway master plan in the books. As we all know, things have changed. And that's why the emphasis of that 5-year period is critical in any master plan. And so, but that is a component that I certainly believe we can do that in-house. We have the ability to do that. It's the getting this ball rolling with the comprehensive master plan, to get that started on day one. You really need the experts.
Okay, thank you.
Council McKinnon.
Through you, Mr. President, to our guest. You mentioned 7 companies. Who are the 7 companies that you would be looking at to actually, or there may be 7 companies in the area or that
So
would be actually bidding on this?
Well, they would be different planning firms. Ideally, I'd probably look at different multidisciplinary firms. We have a firm that's currently working on the Lower Broadway master plan. So someone that has a planning capability, that has some engineering component to the firm as well. There's a ton of them. I mean, when we put out the RFP for the Commercial Triangle master plan, I think we actually received about 6 or 7 proposals. So I'm confident that we get a good selection, a good pool.
You've already had 6 or 7 proposals?
In the
from-
Commercial Triangle master plan,
Okay.
yes.
And would you
yes.
be looking at some of those as, they may propose that they come
They're,
on and do this?
they're certainly welcome to apply. I have the process being just an open process. I'd be very interested to see which firms may apply.
And what's the name of those companies? Do you have that?
Well, the firm that's doing the Lower Broadway master plan is Crosby, Schlesinger, Smallridge. The one that I mentioned in Hudson was VHB, which is technically more of I know them as an engineering firm, but they have a strong planning component as well. Sasaki was the firm that did the Lower Broadway master plan. So
Okay.
it's a
So-
good array.
All right. And then touching on Councilman Hanlon, if in fact they were to add these specific things like, some of the stuff like the public safety building down on
Sure.
Lower Broadway or anything else that, maybe the river or something to that effect, wouldn't that cost more additional funding at that point?
Not necessarily. For example, whether we talk about fire station, police station, that would actually be one of the elements of municipal facilities. One of the things that I think we were about 7 or 8 that I mentioned, but I don't see it necessarily costing more in terms of, and it might sound a little strange, but it's you're essentially tapping into similar databases, and you're going to replicate maps. Yes, you're going to engage a little bit, you can engage further in a public process. It might cost more in terms of time, but I think the items that were mentioned are kind of all relative in the same elements that we could align them
So
with.
300,000 would get the master plan and then some? Is
It'll
that
get you
what
the
we're
get you the creation of the master plan and also the implementation of the master plan as well. So it'll get you the
And if
master
we
plan
added,
document. and
if we
then-
added different, like, articles to that,
I'm not concerned. Yeah, I'm not concerned with that. I mean, one of the elements, for example, that I would personally be interested in, and the community including, which would be up to the community to decide, but regional planning, having that as a component. Again, public health element. Facilities, was already mentioned, but these elements would probably add to the project time, but sometimes you can lump them together. Energy might be another good one to look at. I mean, I'll defer to public conversation for what those elements could be, but I think those are all items that
And we would
be
have
very
a final
valuable.
vote here on this?
I'm sorry?
We would have a final vote on
So-
accepting of this plan?
The accepting of the plan itself, as I recall, the final vote would be via, it's one of the powers of the planning board, so the approval of the final document would be the
So
planning
the
board.
planning board would have the final say, correct?
Yes, yes.
And then that would be it? They just
That would be it.
accept and that would be it.
However, the public process, it's not Tony Sousa making the master plan,
Yeah,
it's not
I
the
understand.
planning board. It's all of us, and it's, again, extensive community process. When we look at let's just say 8 different elements, 8 different topic areas. When we look at a minimum of 2, let's say, public meetings, that's 16. Think of the number of hours, and further interviews, maybe interviews with maybe some of the counselors, interviews with different department heads and other stakeholders in the community. I think it's going to be a great project and a great process. And again, the goal of it is to the whole master plan is an intensive public process. So at the end of the day, you know, the final vote, it's a document that's, I'd like to think, has been well vetted throughout the entire community.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Council Simonelli.
Thank you, Mr. President, through you to Mr. Soper. You mentioned housing is included. Is low-income housing included in this plan?
Whenever you're looking at the element of housing, it would be wise to, yes, to look at low-income housing, all types of housing. All types of housing.
I could say, we really need a lot. I mean, low income, we just don't have enough of it. And I think by maybe getting with this committee, we can help people out, you know, for low-income people that need housing.
You know, in the element of housing, there would be a series, again, of goals and objectives. So if one of the goals from the community is to increase affordable housing, that can be a goal, and the strategy to develop that will be through ordinance, through different community activities, maybe engaging some groups in the process, I think is very healthy, and it is something that could be included in that housing element. So I concur with you.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll excuse customary thanks. Mr. Souza, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you.
Councilors, what's the pleasure? Proper motion would be to refer to our next meeting.
Second.
Moving second, refer this item to our next meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All in favor? Opposed? You have adjourned.